Welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
My name is Carter Mackey.
And this is our first episode. This episode is going to be a little bit different than what we're normally going to do. We wanted to take a few minutes just to share what the idea of this podcast is in the first place. Does that sound good to you, Carter?
Sounds good.
Yeah, so the idea is we know that there are a million board game podcasts. My problem with those podcasts is they're great for what they are, but most of the time I tend to play board games by myself. And I know there are a lot of people out there who do. And from what I can tell, there aren't many podcasts that are totally focused on one-player board games. There are a few of them out there, and they're doing a good job. There's the One Player podcast, and I know the guys from Every Night is Game Night. They do a good job covering solo games as well. But even a podcast like Every Night is Game Night, they don't focus totally on solo games. And that's what we want to do here. That's what makes Solosaurus a little bit different.
All solo all the time, baby.
All solo all the time. I mean, in fact, that's why we picked the name. The idea is basically that a Solosaurus is a person whose game group, whose opportunities to play games with other people are just all but extinct. I mean, I have 2 toddlers at my house, and between that and working full time, there is just no chance that I'm going to have a regular game night every week. It's not going to happen. And Carter's schedule gets pretty busy too, right?
Right, and all of my friends have toddlers, so that's all that really matters.
Yeah, so that's how I got into playing solo board games, and when I did, I enjoyed it right away, but I was frustrated by the fact that there's not anybody out there who's really covering games from that particular angle. Occasionally, you'll get somebody who does discuss the solo element of a game in their review, but I feel like it's almost always an afterthought. That's what we wanted to do to make this a little bit different. So this is a solo-only podcast, and we're not going to be focusing on apps as part of that either. I don't know. I mean, do you even play that many games with apps?
No, it's been a while since I have. I think the last thing I played was Le Havre for iOS, so yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, that was back when Carter and I used to go to school together, and when neither of us wanted to be doing our work, we somehow managed to find Le Havre on sale for 99 cents and played it to death for like a week and then never touched it again.
Right.
Yeah. And I have a couple that I play occasionally. Like I've played the Twilight Struggle app, looking forward to trying the Through the Ages app, only because I really like that game. And I don't think it has much in the way of solo variants out there. So I'd like to give it a shot, but otherwise I'm just not that interested in it. And I feel like most of the people who end up listening to a podcast like this don't want the podcast to be cluttered with talk about apps anyway. So we're not going to be doing that. Maybe one day down the road, we'll have a special episode about board game apps if that's something you all want. But for now, we're just focusing on good old-fashioned cardboard. So yeah, that's the idea. Solo-only games, no apps, and we want to cover a pretty good mix of titles. Our first title is going to be a newer one. We're going to be looking at Legacy of Dragonholt starting with the next episode, but that's not going to be all we do. We want to take a look at some titles that are a little bit older. We want to take a look at some that just have variants. And yeah, I don't have a ton of time to just sit down with a big box every night either. So we'll also take a look at some smaller card games that have some solo variants as well. So all of that's going to be part of the podcast. Also, as part of that, part of what drives our review decisions is we're a new podcast. We don't get review copies of games yet. At least I'm not. I don't know. Maybe you are.
No.
Okay.
No, right.
Well, so since neither one of us are getting review copies, we're not going to be reviewing the latest thing because here's another aspect of this podcast. We don't have boatloads of money.
No.
At least I don't.
No.
Yeah. So I am in ministry. So I'm a pastor. I do not make loads of money. Carter is learning to code right now. And
Both of our wives are in the school system?
Yeah, both of our wives are teachers. Yeah, and diapers are expensive, so I don't buy lots of new games. So we're going to be doing some old games too, including some games that seem like they're just multiplayer, and they actually have some decent solo variants that you can find on Board Game Geek. So we're going to try to help you plumb the depths of your collection a little bit if you're the kind of person who's like us and can't afford everything and just getting started. So there's going to be a little bit of that. Other than that, what we want for this podcast to be is a family-friendly place where you can come and you can learn about solo board games that are out there. You can hear news about solo board games. We'll talk about the news that's going on in the solo board game world. We'll start our episodes with that. And we want you to be able to learn more about it and to make more informed decisions about what you buy, basically, because you want your money to go far. And we feel like we can help you make those decisions. This will be something that we do every other week. We're not quite ready to get started doing it every week yet, but bi-weekly we feel like we can handle. Carter, what about our perspectives? What kind of perspectives do we bring to this podcast to be different from somebody else?
Well, while I have played solo board games before, I mean, honestly, probably less than 5 times, maybe 10. I can't remember. It has not been much, and it's been spread out since over the time I've been playing board games, which is, God, I don't know, like 8 years at this point, maybe longer. As far as like, I say board games, like non-Monopoly type games.
Right.
But since I've known you, I think you've always been into playing solo games.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I started playing board games back in 2011, maybe. I think is when somebody introduced me to Settlers of Catan was my first game.
Right.
And then I moved on to Dominion after that. And the first game after that was actually Eclipse. So it was like barely wading in and then just totally in the deep end of the pool. And I think you and I were playing games together back then a little bit. We kind of got into it around the same time, maybe.
I got in, I think, a little bit earlier than that. I think I got into Catan around 2009. Yeah. I think it was around then. I played a lot of Catan and Munchkin, which I don't know if you really count Munchkin as a board game.
I don't know. I've never played Munchkin.
It's insane.
Yeah.
But I know some people hate it. But yeah, anyway. So that was, I guess, the intro to that. And I started getting to even wading deeper into it. I think it was around 2011 also, about the same time.
Yeah.
Was Mage Knight maybe your first big solo game?
Yeah. Not long after I played Eclipse, the guy who owned the copy of Eclipse told me he had another game he wanted me to play, which was Mage Knight. And I didn't know at the time that was going to take like 6 hours of my life to play a 3-player game of Mage Knight. So I went ahead and said yes, and we played it, and I thought it was a fascinating game. But what fascinated me most was that when I looked at the side of the box, on the side of the box, it said it plays 1 to 5 players. And that kind of threw me for a loop because I guess in some part of my brain, I knew that you could play games by yourself. I mean, people have been playing solitaire forever, but I had never seen it done with any other games. And I was just getting into this new world of hobby board games and really going down the rabbit hole. And that's what fascinated me about that game, is that maybe I could take it and sit in a room by myself sometime because I was really busy with homework at the time and I just couldn't spend 6 hours at a time to play this game. I thought, well, maybe I can get it to go faster playing it on my own. And maybe if this game is out there, maybe there are more games like this. And so that's when I started to explore it. And ever since then, I feel like my free time has just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And, you know, we have a good game group. Our group of friends gets together to play games whenever we can. Right. But that seems like it's less and less often these days.
I would say, yeah. At this point, I'm probably playing a board game with other people maybe once every 6-ish weeks.
Yeah, I would say that's probably true. I mean, you and I get together on Fridays, and we end up... Friday is my day off, and it happens to line up with Carter's as well. Mm-hmm. And so we get together and we play a game usually together. But apart from that, yeah, right. I would say probably the same for me. Once every 6 weeks or 2 months.
Right.
And I want to be gaming way more than that.
Right. Right.
So that's how solo board gaming started for me. And nowadays, I mean, I'm really into it. Like, I won't buy a board game anymore unless it has a solo variant. I can't think of one that I bought in the last year that doesn't. And if it doesn't have a solo variant, it has to be something really special for me to want to pick it up at that point. But you've only played maybe a handful of times solo.
I've played the solo variant for Agricola. Probably that was like one really bored Christmas holiday, I think. And I played like maybe 3 or 4 times in a row.
Yeah.
Gosh, and that might be it. And I just started playing Legacy of Dragonholt. So, oh no, and I have tried to play Eldritch Horror twice, 2 different times solo. And I say try, of course, because I lost ultimately.
Oh yeah, of course, that goes without saying.
But yeah. So it hasn't been much because I know you were playing solo games when we were in school more because you're in general you were married and just a more responsible person in general than I was. So
I didn't feel more responsible. I just desperately wanted to be doing anything that I chose to do instead of doing whatever work was assigned to me. So that's how I got into it. But now it's something that I really love. So we think that that's one of the unique perspectives that we bring to this conversation. I am really into board games that can be played one player. And for you?
Yeah, just, it's something I'm interested in. Obviously, I play a lot of video games, and a lot of times those will be single player experiences also. So, I'm more than okay and enjoy the experience. I've just never done it with board games.
Yeah. And I like video games too. And that occasionally when we get together, that's something that we'll talk about. But I find myself less and less interested in them as a rule, partly because I just find the board game world so fascinating. I think there's a lot of really amazing stuff happening in the board game industry right now, really creative stuff. I know there's a lot of creativity in the video game world as well, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't hold my attention. These days, I would rather be playing a board game than a video game if I can help it. And so solo board games for me is a great alternative to video games. But I saw a poll on the Solo Board Gamers Facebook group recently, which if you're not a part of that group yet, you really should be. It's a good community of people on Facebook who talk about solo board games on a regular basis and post pictures of what they're playing. And one of the polls that we found on there recently is that most of the people on that site who responded to this poll, they started playing solo board games because they weren't getting together with their gaming group often enough. And I feel like that's probably the situation that most people are in. I mean, you can genuinely enjoy solo games, and I do too, but I think most of us, that's the reason we start playing in the first place. We just didn't have another choice, really. Either don't play games or try this new thing.
Right. Yeah, it's not necessarily our first preference by any means. Like, if we can sit down at a table with friends, we will definitely do that, but that's just a lot of times not an option. So solo gaming is just it's not the preference, it's just still getting those board game joys whenever you can't group up with other people.
Right, that's the idea. So our perspectives then, there's somebody who's really committed to solo board games and somebody who's just exploring it for the first time. So if you're in either one of those camps, you have somebody you can identify with there. And also, we are looking for games that have a lot of replayability and that offer something similar to the multiplayer experience. I'm not saying that I can't enjoy a good beat your own score variant, right? I mean, a lot of solo board games out there, that's what they are. You try your hardest to get a high score and you check yourself against some rubric that they have in the rule book. And then beyond that, it's just try to do better than you did last time. I like those fine. I'm not down on those at all. But if I play that kind of game or a game where you beat an AI opponent or something, I still want it to feel like the multiplayer game if at all possible. Not like I'm playing some totally separate game that they packaged in this box just so they could say they have a solo experience.
Right. Specifically almost like a half-baked variant.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially nowadays, it feels like now that people have realized if you include a solo variant, for instance, on a game that you're kickstarting, it's going to do considerably better than a game that doesn't have one. I mean, Not all the time, obviously, because some games are better than others. And a lot of games had a lot more, curb appeal than others. But so that makes a difference too. But having a solo variant in the box does make a difference. Jamie Stegmaier has done YouTube videos on this very thing, proving that that's the case. That's important to me because it feels like nowadays you could get away with having a half-baked solo experience in the box just because it's in high demand. But that doesn't interest me at all. And I've got the feeling it probably doesn't for you either. And because I don't buy games all the time, I want something that has a lot of replayability, a lot of depth. It doesn't have to be a heavy game, but I want some layers of strategy in there.
Right, because budgets are too tight, I feel like, just to justify just blowing through a bunch of games that you're only going to get, I don't know, what, 1 or 2 plays of? Or at least if they're like single session type games, they're not some kind of like legacy or I guess kind of long format game that are.
Right, exactly. So yeah, that's the perspective that we bring to the table. We like a wide variety of games. We both love Euro games. We love thematic Ameritrash games. So we don't bring too many biases on that side of things to the table.
No.
So that's who we are. And what we're going to be doing in this podcast is we're going to talk about the news every week. And then we're going to take a look at one game in particular every week. And maybe we'll add more to the show beyond that eventually, but for now, that's where we want to start. So we want to tell you a little bit about how we're going to be reviewing games, since that's going to be the primary focus of the show. Carter, what's the idea here and behind how we review a game?
Yeah, we decided to go with kind of the Ars Technica way of reviewing things. Ars Technica is a kind of technology website, if you're not familiar with it, but whenever they review video games or really kind of any kind of media type content, at the end, they will give a good, a bad, and an ugly. The good just being the things they thought really stood out about whatever it is they're reviewing. The bad being things they didn't care for as much. And the ugly just kind of being the really just atrocious, awful things that are within whatever it is that they are reviewing. So we thought that could be just a more qualitative way to review games.
Yeah. That's the idea. We're not going to be giving this a score on a scale of 1 to 10 or anything like that. What we're going to be doing is we're going to take a look at things like the components of the game. What is the artwork like? What do the bits feel like? If it has app integration, which is something that we're not against, right, and we consider that to be separate from an app version of a game. How does the app function? What does it look like? What's the interface like?
What's the mouthfeel of the app?
Oh, the mouthfeel. Does it have rich, earthy tones and notes of blueberries? Yeah, we want to take a look at all of those things. We want to talk about the rule book. How is it a terrible tome to get through, or is it something you can get to the table and understand pretty well what's going on? We want to talk about how the rules are constructed. Yeah, we also want to talk about replayability and what kind of strategy and layers the game presents to us over time so that you can get kind of a long view of what kind of life this game is going to have on your shelf if you decide to invest in it. And we also ultimately want to talk about whether this is a fulfilling experience as a game. And I feel like I have a pretty good radar for that because I play a lot of solo board games. But in some ways, I have blind spots because I've seen so many faults in solo board games for so long that maybe I can overlook them. But I feel like that's where you can offer some good perspective because you're primarily a multiplayer gamer at this point anyway.
Right.
And so maybe there will be things that are glaringly, obviously obnoxious to you that I just don't see.
And I will ravage them.
Oh, yes. I fully expect that to be the case. Carter is very no holds barred. Mm-hmm. You don't know this about him yet, and I know that he sounds very unassuming in your car speaker or wherever you're listening to this, but he is a monster.
I'm a real honey badger.
Honey badger. Oh, that's a good image. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So even though we're not going to be scoring games on a scale of 1 to 10, we do have some way that we want to acknowledge games that we feel like really excel in giving you a great solo experience.
Right. And so games that are really satisfying and stand out to both of us, we want to give our stomp of approval.
Yeah, you get it, right? Like stomp instead of stamp because this is a, tangentially dinosaur themed podcast.
Right. And dinosaurs stomp because they're large.
So we want to give the stomp of approval to games. And what does that mean for a game?
So the stomp of approval means that this is a game that we both just really, really enjoyed a lot, because there will definitely be times when I'm sure there's a game that I really enjoyed a lot, but Brandon was a little bit cooler on it. Might still be a solid and good game, but our stomp of approval will be reserved for those games that really resonate with both of us and deserve to be obliterated by a giant dinosaur footprint.
Yeah. And not only a game that we both really enjoy and we both highly recommend, but if you see a game that has our stomp of approval, what that means is we recommend that you buy this game even if you never play it with other people. If you see that stomp, what it means is the solo variant that's in the box here, or that you could find a variant for on Board Game Geek, is good enough that you could buy the game and totally get your money's worth for it just by playing the solo variant. So that's the idea behind the stomp of approval. Right now, obviously, the stomp of approval is just something you might see on Facebook from us, or on Instagram, or on our website or something. It's not like companies are rushing out to print awards from very new podcasts on their game box. But a guy can dream. Obviously, one day I totally expect to walk into Walmart or Target and see a whole shelf of games that have our stomp of approval, because Walmart would not imagine stocking a game that didn't get this award from us.
Right. Just the same way that dinosaurs always imagined getting to eat bagels eventually.
Right, they did, but that didn't work out for them either. So maybe that'll never happen. I don't know.
Right.
So that's all we've got for you this episode. What we wanted to do basically was to set the stage for you so you know what's coming in the episodes to come.
Right. 50 different versions of Solitaire the card game.
Yes, 50 different versions. Also, if you have a new version of Solitaire that you would like to pitch to us, please email Carter at cartermackey@gmail.com. He would be happy to field those requests.
Oh, you wish that was my email.
Yeah, it's not. It's not really. Don't try to email him at that address.
Or whoever is at that address.
Yeah, some guy in Colorado who hates us for having just said this on air. So, next episode, we are going to be taking a look at the legacy of Dragonholt. So get ready for that. It will be a spoiler-free review. We are going to talk about mechanics, obviously, and we're going to give our impressions of it, but we're going to try not to give away key story points. So if you're worried about it being ruined for you, you don't have to worry about that. So join us next time for that. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.